Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Feng Shui Society webinar. My name is Gina Lazenby. I'm the chair of the society, and I'm excited about our webinar tonight. We have with us Roger Green, who hails from New Zealand, hails from Sydney, and tonight with us in New York. So truly global is Roger, and he was just sharing with us how his work is very much US and Australia based. And I just want to share my initial connection with Roger. My recollection, Roger, is meeting you at a supper arranged at my house in 1993 or 94. And I think we had Simon Brown there, William Spear, and one of them must have brought you. I hadn't met you before. Boy George was there. And if Takashi Yoshikawa wasn't there, then Simon Brown was talking about him. And he introduced me to you. I had a feng shui school at the time. And then we had this wonderful agreement, you coming over from Sydney to come and teach in our school, and you were teaching classical feng shui, and that was marvelous. So we had a few years doing that. So Roger has a huge background in feng shui, and he might tell us that he still teaches a little bit, I think in Prague. But Roger's work now is predominantly based on what he was involved in at the time, which was the energy of food, natural healing, and he has had his Academy of Natural Healing for more than 40 years. I mean, a real pioneer in that area, and at the same time works tremendously in researching breakthrough technologies for healing, for energy. I think a key theme of Roger's work is longevity, living long and living well. And where I actually have been studying with the Academy of Healing Nutrition this last year, because I could see that, yes, it's useful for me, and I hope you'll all find this useful for yourselves. But really, as a feng shui practitioner, as feng shui people, we are in and out of people's homes, a very private and sacred space. We get the opportunity to see their lives, how they are, how well they use the kitchen. And often we see that they're not well. I mean, some people could be sick or can be what I call walking wounded. You're walking around, but you're still not really well. A lot of people are on the edge of illness and not thoroughly well. And nowadays, we do really need to take care of our well-being. So, some of you may be interested in developing this skill. So Roger's going to give us some tips about the longevity diet. He's also going to talk about the academy. And it may be something that you're interested in adding to what you do. If not, here you are getting a lot of benefit for how you can use this personally, as I do. So Roger, I'm going to give you a huge welcome. Everybody's going to do this because it's easier than applauding. If we were in a room, we would be doing this for sure. But I'm going to hand over angels. I'm going to hand over to you and welcome you and give you the platform, and we're here to support you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gina. And hello, everybody. Off to a better start this time. Remember, a couple of months ago, we attempted to do this from London. We were all set for it, and where I was staying, we hired a Airbnb in London, and the internet was working fine up until that evening, where it just completely shut down. And that was the first time in 3 years of doing, as you can imagine, with the pandemic and everything just shutting down, and everybody starting to use Zoom. And I've been definitely, like everybody else, been using that a lot over the last 3 years. But that night was the first time that I got, whacked by the universe. And unfortunately, we couldn't go ahead with the evenings get together. And Gina beautifully rescheduled everything. And here we are. And finally, I get to do a presentation for the Feng Shui Society. So thank you, Gina. So just as a little bit of a foundation and a little bit of a background, you see the tradition of Taoism in China and all throughout Asia. Traditionally, they used to have a lot of schools. You could almost call them monasteries, and this is where people would actually send their children, and they would learn all of the 8 rays of Taoist philosophy. That, we've got this core philosophy of Tao, yin and yang, the 5 elements, the 3 treasures, the 10 heavenly stems, the 12 earthly branches, the 8 trigrams. It's an incredible deep philosophy. And the practical aspects of that are called the 8 rays. And so you actually have food as medicine. Separate to that, you have herbs, herbalism. You have massage, you have acupuncture. You have Feng Shui, you have cosmology. Cosmology is the sort of the astrology aspect of it. You have the martial arts. And of course, the Taoists, through Tai Chi, they developed that. Tai Chi is the basis of all martial arts. And of course, those schools gradually disappeared and virtually don't exist anymore in Taiwan and China. Now, interestingly enough, one of our faculty members at the academy, Nam Singh, he has a very, very interesting background because he's actually African American, but his grandfather sponsored him to come to Taiwan and go to one of these last remaining monasteries where the children were trained in all of the Taoist arts, but they also got arithmetic and language and chemistry and like a normal curriculum, as well as all of the life skills that Taoism offers us. And but even that school got closed down, I think 20, 30 odd years ago, because their parents now just want their kids to become computer engineers and programmers. But 40 odd, 35 odd years ago, my background was I was living in London as like a 20-year-old. I was very, very sick. I went through the 70s. I took every known drug that was ever existed on the planet. I got run down, had a great time, but I serious health problems, and I managed to heal myself with starting to understand yin and yang and eating with the seasons and introducing myself to a whole lot of new foods. And I went on to study massage and acupuncture. And then I was a founder of one of the early kind of prototypes of a natural healing center in Sydney, Australia. They didn't really exist back in those days, where, you would put together, like a chiropractor and an acupuncturist. And I was doing nutritional training and shiatsu and acupuncture and so forth. And I started a cooking school there because I noticed that, I was doing a lot of counseling, but people really needed to be shown how to put all of this together, right? Because it sort of goes in one ear and out the other, and you're introducing themselves to, you introduce new ingredients and they go, what? So I put together a cooking school that became the Academy of Healing Nutrition. Other people wanted to train in that art. So I discovered that I already had about 4 of these modalities, because even back then, we were showing people how to use the tonic herbs in Taoism. We weren't showing them how to use the 360 herbs that are the therapy herbs that takes several years of training. We were showing them like grandmother's healing wisdom from the Orient, which was using these culinary herbs, tonic herbs, that you could easily find from Chinatown and put them into soups and broths. And you, quite frankly, you only need to know about 10 to 15 of them. And so we had that module. I had a shiatsu training school, and we actually incorporated weekends of acupuncture. We couldn't qualify people in acupuncture because that's like a 4-year course. But even in those days, I was very frustrated with the way these Taoist arts were coming into the West and how it got institutionalized. And, you'd go to acupuncture school and people would be drinking Coca-Cola and heating up their food in the microwave. And so we actually put an acupuncture program together over 10 weekends that you can get very, very confident for home style acupuncture. So I had that. And then I started to write, way before anybody else, a classical Feng Shui curriculum, because it's one of the arts. And I didn't have any teacher. And I'm looking back on that, I was fortunate not to have a teacher, because sometimes you know, with your teacher, you just get attached and aligned, and you don't think things through much. And so I actually had to create a curriculum from the ground up. And I only could use yin and yang and the 5 elements. And fortunately, in my acupuncture training background, you actually come across quite a bit of the cosmology, the 10 heavenly stems, the 12 earthly branches, and so forth. But I had to be quite a detective to put together a classical Feng Shui training. So, and we also did Doan and exercise and so forth. So technically speaking, I had, for the first time in the West, a school that was teaching all of the 8 rays of Chinese medicine. We covered it all. And I had that up and running for sort of like a good 3 to 4 years. But then the Feng Shui curriculum took me to all over the world, something like 70 countries. Gina was amazing. She put together the London training. And so pretty much I was the first teacher in both America and in England and in Europe to teach classical Feng Shui. There was nobody else doing that. I know that history really, really, really well. I know who was doing what, and because most people were trained in the Black Sect style of Feng Shui, and one of my mentors, Bill Spear, was trained in Black Sect. So I was very, very familiar with that. And some people wanted more. They wanted to know how to do the 4 pillars astrology. They wanted to know how to use the Lopan compass. They wanted to learn more of the design techniques with the flying star and so forth. So that's what took me, we started to set up training schools all over the show. However, after 10 or 15 years of that, I kept running the healing side of the academy back in Sydney. A lot of the other modules I had to stop, like the shiatsu training and the exercise program and the counseling program. But I kept running the academy because it's just so vitally important to understand food as medicine. And we live in a time that people they're so confused around it. There's no ancestral wisdom much around. The folklore of medicine is only just starting to resurface. So it's vitally important to keep that going. I kind of put it on the back burner a little bit. And then I pretty much slowed down with the Feng Shui to really get back to the Academy Healing Nutrition. And then I set up a school in New York and London and Prague, and we kept it going to Sydney. And then over the last couple of years, we've put it on a completely online version. So as we've really gone global. Now, we used to be a very old-fashioned school. I learned a long time ago that you've got to show people how to do this. It's all the Taoist arts are practical skills, right? Yes, there's great philosophy that you learn, but you've got to follow it up with being around experienced teachers who show you how to pull all this together. And so you always needed that practical side, that cooking side. So in actual fact, the academy was always sort of structured on a weekend of philosophy, energetics, new ingredients, and then followed up by a practical weekend. And students would get to eat it and taste it and go, wow, and I'm going to do this back at home. And that's basically all we wanted our students to do, was to actually follow through and try this and start to experience the healing effects of these recipes and these new ingredients and the new mindset, etc. And I was very worried about how to transform that onto a live format with our students, with going completely on Zoom live because of the pandemic and because everything got shut down. I was running this in Prague and London and New York. And anyway, it was actually very successful. And in fact, it even became even more better for the students, because up until that time, doing the practical cooking weekends was like running a 5-star restaurant, which we thoroughly enjoyed. It was demonstration style, so they would sit there and we'd see how we'd put it all together, and and then we'd feed them really, really well. They'd get several dishes and they would go yum, 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 and go home and repeat it. But this time now, they actually have to go shopping for the ingredients themselves, right? And with the camera set up, Inga Balinkino is our primary cooking instructor. And she's got a camera set up in her kitchen. She's based in Iceland now. And the students actually follow her in their kitchen, making these restaurants, which I've discovered is actually even more ideal, more focused, more getting into your bones, getting into your muscles, going like, oh, wow, I can do this. It's breaking that kind of reinforcing those more positive skills, positive habits around food as medicine. So it actually took the school to the next level. So I was really, really happy about that. Right now, so what we're going to do today, I'm going to sort of take you through some of the core philosophies that we use around food as medicine. What makes us different, because we are actually quite different. By the way, I have not had to change the guidelines and the principles of what I've been teaching for the last 40 years with food as medicine, right? So I think there's a kind of an element of truth in what we're doing. That's up for you to decide. Some of the material might be a little controversial for you today, because we do break through a lot of the so-called myths around foods. And I think there's been a lot of naughtiness from Western nutrition over the last 50 to 60 years. They don't really understand the energetics. We do. We understand Jing. We understand eating with the seasons. We understand ancestral eating. We understand the wisdom from our ancestors, the way they did certain preparations to make things digestible. So we're kind of a lot different from Western nutrition, where they actually are always breaking things down. The reductionist theory, as you know, is to start to look at chemicals and molecules. And of course, there's a place to study that. But we're actually we're holistic. We look at the big picture, and we look at the energetics. We use yin and yang. It is still a marriage of East and West. Obviously, we're Western people. We come from a scientific background. My university training was in science. I loved science to this day, but it has its limitations with that reductionist theory, where you can study a food right down to the last little branch of its molecular structure and still not know what to eat for breakfast, and still not feel good. Right? So I'm going to take you through some of the controversial areas, which I hope will stimulate some questions later on. I am going to take you through what we do with the Academy, and we better get started with that, I think. I've got some slides here I want to I'm going to share my screen, Gina, and you can probably see that, can you?
Yeah, I can see it. You can see the whole screen. As soon as you hit play, then we'll see just the slideshow.
And has that come up okay for you?
Yeah, we can see it. As I say, you can see the whole screen when you, as I say, when you hit play. But I can see it on my screen, and I get everybody. Yeah. Okay,
good. So we have been around for some time, and it is first of all, students do this for themselves and their family, and it's a personal development training. And it's to start to secure your health for you personally and for your family and for your loved ones, and to develop your consciousness. We all know that there's a strong relationship between food and enlightenment, and food and personal development, and food and relationships, and food and physical health. And that goes right back to the beginning of time. And there's a lot of spiritual traditions that have always had many aspects of food hygiene, you might say, right? And so that's baseline for everybody, but it's also a professional training course. We train people to become life coaches, longevity diet experts, because we think, just like Feng Shui, we think there's a strong need to help people in our modern life because there's so much disease around. I mean, and so much confusion around, and people kind of get lost in it all. So yes, they need coaches, they need guidance, they need people to help them step by step, just like we do in Feng Shui. So these are very, very closely aligned. And I hope today that in your Feng Shui work, that you'll be able to take a few pieces of information that you might resonate with and use it constructively with your clients. Obviously, I personally think it takes a little bit. Food is the biggest habit as a human being you have. That's number one, and that's a psychological clinical fact that we know, because as you know, you establish all your patterning and habits for those first 7 years of your life from your family environment, from your parents, and they're deeply ingrained. And it does take a little bit more than just a quick little conversation. We get highly motivated students who pay serious money, and we're with them 100% for a whole year to help them to make these changes. So I'm not casual about the subject. 40 odd years ago, when I had to do my own healing around this, I went, oh my God, the food and drink is something that we do 3-4 times a day. And nobody seems to know anything about it. We just, like, where did that come from? Why are you doing that? Nobody was asking any questions. And I thought, hold on a minute, this is really, really important as a foundation for. And then when I discovered Taoism, which starts to connect food with herbs and organ groups and taste and seasons, and it becomes a whole philosophy of the universe, all right? So yes, I take this very, very seriously, and I would suggest that you take it very, very seriously. That's what this training course technically is about. But look, there's a lot of value in what I'm going to be taking you through. I am going to be taking you through the ingredients of a longevity diet today, so you really get a good grounding on what we get up to with the Academy of Healing Nutrition. So yes, it was. So here's the deal. In the Academy, I combine the time-tested theories and philosophies around food as medicine, particularly the Taoist tradition, and you can sometimes say classical Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, if you like. Ayurvedic has been around for several thousands of years, similar in the sense that they have this energetic view. As you know, they look at the body types, they look at constitutional factors, they look at all of the food groups energetically. And then in my early days, I had some macrobiotic teachers, and that was absolutely amazing. And I take my hat off to the macrobiotic community. 30, 40 years ago, I integrated some of their foods, etc. However, when I started to go deeper into Taoism, I discovered that macrobiotics was a little bit more limited in their viewpoint, especially with the clinical application. They have a different perspective, as you know, on yin and yang, which I think they really need to get away from because it limits their understanding. Because of the difference of yin and yang that they have, it takes them out of this beautiful group of families that where they study Taoism and become herbalists and acupuncturists, martial arts, Feng Shui practitioners. So I think it's very, very important to keep that paradigm. And you don't need to mess with the paradigm. You don't need to start changing yin and yang around. And it's a very interesting history because George Osawa was the founder of macrobiotics, and he didn't have a Taoist Chinese medicine background. He was like a poet and a political activist, and he healed himself with the Japanese traditional diet and then went on to write beautiful, beautiful books, but didn't really pay too much attention to diet and tried to, the diet was very, very straightforward, and there was no herbs or spices or anything, nothing too elaborate, and actually changed the terminology of yin and yang around to try and make it a little bit more materialistic, took away some of the metaphysics to a degree, tried to make it a little bit more tangible for the Western minds to grasp it, and that kind of stuck in the macrobiotic community. But 40, 50 years ago, the macrobiotic and the Rudolf Steiner movement were the only kids on the block teaching food as medicine, and they're the ones that started the natural food revolution, organic farming, all the health food stores, the food products. So I take my hat off to the macrobiotic community and always will. However, just to make a point that this is not a macrobiotic diet, and macrobiotics has become, even when I started the school, we incorporated the foods, we incorporated some of the early teachings of Osawa, because they're incredible writings, and the writings of Hermann E. Hare and Michio Kushi and Bill Tara and so forth. But just so you know, we use some of the ingredients that the macrobiotic community introduced 50 odd years ago, because they're incredibly healing. We don't use those energetics, and we're not into any dogma. So we actually come from looking at all of the food groups. So I always say, look, if you're vegan, we're going to show you how to do it better, because you need to know how to do it better if you're vegan. It's a very extreme diet. From a Taoist perspective, which is all about the middle way, right? Anything that goes this way or that way starts to be an extreme, like the carnivorous diet, very, very yang, and generally that vegan diet, very, very yin. And or vegetarianism, we're going to show you how to do it better. If you're a meat eater, we're going to show you how to do it better, but we don't get involved with any of the dogma. We look at all the food groups. And what we find when students go through this training, when they've had particular health problems and they haven't been able to manage it, when they start to open up and look at the bigger picture and start to understand food as medicine, that they expand out, they get more diverse, and that's where we just get a lot of clinical results, a lot of great healing miracles with our students. By the end of the year, they are really, really like vibrantly, all those initial illnesses, ailments, really, really do get cleaned up, and they, by actually diversifying. And I've noticed that over 40 years of clinical training in this. So traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic. Now, here's the deal. Cultures of longevity. And I first came across the writings of Weston, W-E-S-T-O-N, Price, 40 years ago, when nobody was actually paying much attention to it. And it was a remarkable book that he wrote in the late 1920s, 1930s, where this is the guy that actually, historically, was the first guy that went to over a dozen, it was about 15 cultures of longevity that he went to before the Second World War. And you see, after the Second World War, a lot more people a lot more tribes and cultures around the world got exposed to the westernized diet, highly industrialized diet, and it sort of took them away. For economic reasons, they sort of moved and shifted, and modern transportation started to be developed, and now you're drinking, orange juice when you're in Tibet, right? But before that, you could travel and around the world and visit cultures of longevity where they were still eating their traditional diets. And he discovered that they didn't, he was a dentist, he was obsessed about why is Americans' dental health appalling? Where's all these problems coming from? His colleagues couldn't give him any answers. So he traveled the world He documented it really well. And he discovered that when people were obviously eating their traditional diets and using those wisdoms, they didn't have any degenerative disease. They had wonderful teeth. They didn't even have toothbrushes or toothpaste. They had good bone structure. They had a happy temperament. Often they would live well over 100, right? And so the academy sort of goes like, well, let's study them. And what were some of their secrets, so to speak, and let's put that in our modern life, right? And so some of the slides further down the track are going to be about fats and oils, because that's 40 odd years ago, we know from Chinese medicine that high quality fats and oils build up the Jing, which Jing is your constitutional energy. And for those who have studied Feng Shui a bit, hopefully you were trained in what was called the three treasures: Jing, Qi and blood, and Shun, the spirit. And in fact, that's the embodiment of Feng Shui training, because it's heaven, earth, and humanity. So, the earth is your form school. The heaven is all your classical Feng Shui metaphysical training, like the 8 trigrams, the flying star, the 4 pillars, 10 heavenly stems, 12 earthly branches. And then the human, which is between heaven and earth, is the Ren Qi, the heart Qi, your own personal human Qi in that. And so the Feng Shui practitioner is always working with the 3 treasures. Now in Chinese medicine, we embody that into the body, and that becomes your Jing, associated with the kidneys, and the Qi in the blood is associated with the earth element. And of course, that's called the school of the stomach and spleen, which is all about building up Qi, building up energy from food and recipes and the art of cooking. And then the Shun is your mind, your spirit, and your mental faculties. So we come from that perspective a lot. Now, so the Jing is your constitutional energy, and it's like the deep Jing is like your hormones, and you need good quality fats. And so when I came across the writings of Weston Price, and I was very familiar with Chinese medicine by that stage, I have never been propagating the low-fat diet. I thought, oh man, God, this is ridiculous. And historically, we've used these high-quality fats, like saturated fats. And when you look into the history of this, that it's only been in the last 70, 80 odd years that they've really pushed a lot of the vegetable oils onto us. And when you use concepts like the doctrine of signatures, which you're probably trained in, hopefully, in your Feng Shui training, where we love taking shapes and colors from nature and incorporating that into our Feng Shui, don't we? Like the earth element, the fire element, they all have these shapes and colors. And that's part of the doctrine of signatures, because we have that in their body, right? Anyway, I've got some good I've got some good slides about fats and oils, because that, I hope, will be a good take-home key thing for you today to kind of think about, to learn, and maybe start to incorporate, because it's very, very important. Basically, our food chain has changed radically since the Second World War, and we have got away from a lot of these things. And for instance, when you bring the energetics back, you can understand, like the doctrine of signatures is like, if you eat a food that stays around, you will stay around, right? So we know like miso stays in the pantry for 30 odd years, and you can come back and go, wow, right? And just like grandma, my Scottish grandma had the lard next to her stove, right? And she didn't put it in the refrigerator, and it never went off, and it was stable, and no fungus grew on it, right? So in the doctrine of signatures, that's a longevity food. Just like you find grains that are several thousands of years old and they haven't gone off, because the centripetal force, the coherent energy is strong there, and it's not getting into entropy or breaking down, right? So we can take these energetics and marry it with Western nutrition and put together a really good healing protocols, which often are not supported by the current theories, especially from Western nutrition. So 40 odd years ago, I got a lot of slack, you know, because we were using the traditional fats and oils, and we weren't propagating vegetables, we weren't propagating the low fat. We understood that having high quality fats is also good for your blood sugar levels. And most people have chronic problems with blood sugar. And you see, fats don't spike your blood sugars, right? And it's kind of like that French paradox, you know, why Westerners couldn't understand. The French, they eat this duck fat and they have this rich food, and they look great, and they're not on, there's no obesity, and they live generally pretty good, you know, and people are going like, and they called it a paradox. No, it's not a paradox. You can clearly understand those energetics and those nutritional factors there, right? Absolutely. So that's something that we're going to cover, and that's something that I learned from the Western A. Price Foundation, which wasn't very strong back then, but in the last 20 years, there's a writer called Sally Fallon, and Fallon, Fallon, and she wrote a book called Nourishing Traditions, and I highly recommend that book to complement my evening with you, because she was the girl that sort of took Western A. Price writings, which were quite dense. You know how people used to, this wasn't a modern book with pretty pictures, you know, it's a solid book, very academic, very astute. He just did really, really well, showing how people traditionally ate and they didn't get degenerative disease, but she modernized it and she put some recipes in there and she brought up these ideas of like real food again, and that's become a grassroots movement here in America and Europe, and they have chapters all over the world. And to back up some of the things that I'm saying to do today with you, the website Western A. Price Foundation has very, very good clinical material, medical papers, looking, basically saying, where's the evidence for saturated fat with heart disease? Where's the evidence? And there basically never was, right? There was a lot of mischief from the, basically the quick story goes like this. They had a lot of vegetable oils to sell because of modern farming methods, and, you know, and suddenly TV came along and, you know, back in the 60s, and they could use that to propagate all the vegetable oils. They started to associate saturated fats with heart disease, no clinical evidence. And then everybody was like, oh, okay, you know, the propaganda sat in, and it's still there strongly today, that propaganda, but people are slowly starting to question this, right? Well, I questioned that 40 years ago, is the point I'm making. We haven't had to change anything in our curriculum. The guidelines and the principles have been stable all this time. So that's a strong influence on this curriculum. We've got the energetics on one side, and then we've got Western nutritional theory based on ancestral eating, based on cultures of longevity. And Western Price didn't get into any of the energetics. So I do consider it's a good balance with the East and the West, which is the exciting time that we live in. So the bottom line for the Academy is to show people how to live a long and happy life, as simple as that. You know, I think a theme of being your own doctor, taking 100% responsibility, this idea of, that's a very Taoist attitude, as you know. We're into self-mastery. We see the universe as this living essence, and there's no such thing as accidents. There's always messages. There's always things that we can read and put into patterns and get meaning from it, and have self-reflection and act on that ourselves, develop it ourselves, master it ourselves. We're very into prevention. That's the strong thing, but it's also a curative diet, right? Obviously, prevention is where it's at. You don't want a degenerative disease. You want to live a long, healthy life. But you know, when people have got digestive problems, fatigue problems, most students show up with some kind of ailment that they want to work with and transform through the training. So it's both curative, food is medicine, but mainly let's look after our constitution. Let's eat for our constitution. Let's understand the bio-individuality of our constitution. So I always say that holistic medicine is really about looking after your constitution. And that's where you get your long life and avoidance of degenerative disease. And that's how you can safeguard your bones, your qi, your jing, and so forth. Very much a mind-body connection, which runs through all the Taoist arts like Feng Shui and martial arts. We take people from whole food gourmet style cooking and introducing them to all these new ingredients and recipes coming from the school of the stomach and spleen. And then we take them to an advanced level with doing the longevity herbal cooking. And nobody else does that. Nam Sing is a master of that. He grew up in that monastery in Taiwan, and his passion was cooking and cooking with the herbs. And we also integrate the superfoods and the elixirs. You might know that Taoism has this long, long history of the immortalists and the elixirs. And we show you how to integrate that into the three treasures. So, for instance, when we come across superfoods, and we were strong in introducing superfoods to the Western community. And what we did was we went, okay, yes, sure, it's full of antioxidants and magnesium, you know, what isn't? You know, that's the boring stuff. Is it warming? Is it cooling? Does it build up your blood? Is it good for your jing? Is this a shun food? You know, so we put all the energetics to that and made really, really great recipes around all the superfoods that are now coming in. Isn't it interesting that nature provides these amazing foods when we really need them, when everybody's got health problems and 1 in 4 people have got cancer and there's digestive syndrome and fatigue and you name it. So good old universe shows up when we need it. So yes, we get into superfoods. We talk a lot about how to integrate this into your lifestyle, right? Strategy around shopping, how to spend your hard-earned money, how to create new habits, how to simplify it, how to not make it complicated, and you know, strategies like making stock that you can then put in the freezer and use for the next month. You know, and those kind of dynamics are very, very important. So that and some simple cooking skills also, like, you know, the one pot thing, and you know, so that it's manageable, it's fun, it's not a drag to do, right? So that's really, really important. We like to cover home remedies, because it's this whole idea that just in your kitchen and in your garden, nature provides these things that you can heal common ailments, like a sore back and headaches and fevers and food poisoning. So there's a module there that they call the Barefoot Doctor, which again is that wonderful Taoist tradition of the Barefoot Doctor was the village shaman, the village healer. And, you know, they had skills with food and herbs and exercise and acupressure points and compresses, just like our old-fashioned Western doctors did. At the turn of the century, they used to show up at your house with their little black bag, right? And they'll bring out their tinctures and give some dietary advice, and then sort of go, now behave yourself, right? And then walk out the door, right? So we had a lot of feminine medicine, even in the West, but of course now it's become all pharmaceuticals, chemicals, high tech, and of course there's a place for that. I would never bag that. It's some of it, of course, is absolutely amazing, but I always put that down the last little thing of healing. You know, you start with yourself, you start with food, exercise, self-reflection, massage, acupuncture, herbs, and then perhaps surgery, right, and pharmaceuticals. So we do some health assessment. If you're going to be your own doctor, you need to understand yin and yang and how it shows up. It's just information. Hot diseases, cold diseases. What does it mean if somebody's got cold hands, cold feet? What does it mean if they struggle to go to the toilet? What does it mean if they lose their appetite? And beautifully, we can put that into the 5-element theory, which correlates all of that. So in Feng Shui, we work with that. The 5 elements become the directions, the colors, the shapes. It's a way of using some remedies. It's a design skill we use. But we also have everything in Taoism is got the 5 elements in it. Acupuncture has it, martial arts, Feng Shui, or the herbs are correlated with that. And of course, food is medicine. And so in diagnosis, there's 7 patterns that you learn about the 5 elements that are really, really good. It only takes a weekend of training. Sure, we're not training people to be acupuncturists. That's a 5-year course, but you can get the real essences of that from just a weekend training, right? It's a very elegant philosophy, as you know, Taoism and 5 elements. So yes, we incorporate health assessment. I think that's important for you to study in your own life, how to gauge yin and yang, 5-element. There's a lot of deficiencies around, right? So it's important to understand that, I think, from a modern day perspective. Okay. So yes, and on that theme, from the Eastern view, we have an energetic point of view. We ask people how they feel, and they will say things. I feel cold. I feel hot. I feel sluggish. I feel damp. So these are the things that we work with, as opposed to in Western medicine, it's about blood tests and X-rays and being a specialist, seeing a specialist. And of course, there's a place for that. I'm just making the distinction between the two, that the mastery of this is mastering the energetic view, the yin and yang, the energetics. That you can train yourself from today onwards, right? And use, right? With your family, with yourself, and you can use it professionally as well. Obviously, a big difference between the SAD, which is the sad, modern, industrialized diet, where we've got away from our traditional foods. It's fragmented, full of chemicals, sugar consumption, pesticides, adulterated. Also, the mindset, people, just love the convenience, zapping something in a microwave, which is incredibly destructive for the chi of the body, the blood of the body. So that's sort of like quick, gratification without slowing down, reflecting, strategizing, and creating the effort. You're not going to get anywhere in life unless you're able to align again, which is the mindset, and then follow through with the effort. And so, yes, we are into the slow food movement. We love that, right? It's very aligned with what we do. We are aligned. We're not aligned with anything, that's just a quick fix, right? It's just not. It's very superficial thinking, and so we celebrate everything that's sort of time tested and deeply nourishing, and so forth. So that's a bit of a mindset difference there. So yes, we celebrate sustainable, centering, nourishing, nutrient dense. I'm going to cover very well with you, because that's the key to healing. Nutrient dense foods, because we don't have them in our modern life. The modern diet is not nutrient dense anymore because of the industrialization. Now, our ancestors they only ate nutrient dense foods, right? That was it. That was the only thing. They didn't have a supermarket. They didn't have a factory pumping stuff out, right? In a way, they didn't have any choice. And and of course, as I said in my introduction, we have no dogma. Taoism is not dogmatic. Taoism is non-credo. Taoism is, I don't believe anything. I'm going to look at this. I'm going to experiment with this. I'm going to make up my mind. I'm going to master this myself, right? sure, we have teachers and guidance and books and things, but at the end of the day, it's the way you intuitively mix all this together and evolve with it, with your own destiny, right? And become a free thinker and not get locked into other people's opinions, other people's, perspectives. Sure, we listen to that, but very, very important. And I think when you come from a perspective like, okay, I'm just going to start again with all of this, and I'm not going to have any dogma blocking my viewpoints, because this could be some vital information that I need from other traditions and perspectives that could be very, very valuable, right, to my healing. I do have a concept called the 120 Plus Club that we'll look at later on down on the slides here. So the School of the Stomach Spleen is about the building strong digestive fire. The earth element in our modern age, the last couple of generations, these poor kids have been brought up with poor quality foods, a lot of vegetable oils which oxygenate, a lot of sugar, a lot of confusion, and kind of convenience foods, fast foods. My generation, we didn't have that, fortunately. We still had a lot of home cooking. My family went out once a year. I think a lot of my generation can relate to that. And once a year, Dad took us to the People's Palace at Christmas time. And we had something very, very similar, a roast dinner that we would have once or twice a week anyway. It was a big deal. But, so there's a place for establishing home cooking again and learning the alchemy of cooking, because it creates the high quality foods that you need, and it recreates that digestive fire, and that's where a lot of the healing comes. But sure, once your digestion gets stronger, your circulatory system gets stronger, your nervous system gets stronger, and you can really, really follow through with your goals and aspirations. And you could find that you can start to eat a little bit of food that you might have had problems with occasionally, and it doesn't do you in, because your digestive fire is so much, you can transmute a lot more. So we actually want to become free people where we can, enjoy quite a range of foods. And this is something that the students actually discover. Like, a lot of them come with gluten sensitivities, which are real, right? And at the end of the year, they now can enjoy some high quality gluten-based, like sourdough bread done in the right way, breaking down the gluten anyway, and enjoying that and not getting any headaches or bloating again, right? So it's very much about re-establishing the digestive fire, the school, which is a 6,000-year-old tradition called the School of the Stomach and Spleen. Do we cover foods for the immune system? Absolutely. Do we get into the adaptogenics? Absolutely. Adaptogenics are these wise herbs that sort of give you what you need at that time, right? Do we get into detoxifying protocols? Yes, but we don't need to go overboard with any sort of extreme things with that, because once you start to get natural foods again and get these energetics in place, your body starts to naturally detoxify. We've got strong organs of detoxification, the kidneys and the liver and the skin, of course, right? So you can give it a chance. Plus, we have foods that just naturally help us detoxify, like sea vegetables that do that for us all the time. So in this curriculum, we never have to go through any sort of, we don't propagate anything extreme that could even do some damage. But have we been talking about intermittent fasting, which is now all the rage for the last 40 years? But we show people how you can do it in a very manageable way, not in any sort of extreme way. We show people what time of the year to do it. We show you people how you can actually integrate it on a weekly basis or in a day-to-day basis, with not overeat. The recipes we have really, really nourish you, so you don't overeat. And often you can get just down to 2 meals a day, right? You mightn't start off with that. So, and that gives the digestive system time to recalibrate. We don't eat late at night. all of these things that the intermittent fasting people are talking about, it's been around in Taoism for 6,000 years. It's nothing new to us, right? Okay, so here's the deal. The longevity diet, we look at all of the food groups, and in this modern age, you might have noticed that a lot of people are sort of saying, oh, I can't eat complex carbohydrates. Or sometimes people just say carbohydrates and they don't distinguish between simple and complex. And there's a place for that. I mean, these are real symptoms. I understand that. But on further examination, often people don't understand the process of making these foods digestible, right? So traditionally with, say, whole grains, people used to soak them, they used to crush them, they used to put them into soup, they used to put into a porridge, into a gruel, into what's called a congee. And this makes things ever so more digestible, right? So it's a big subject. In the academy, we spend more time on that. But if you're going to ask me, are grains and beans part of this protocol? Are grains and beans being used with every culture of longevity that Western price study? Absolutely. So to remove a whole very, very important category out of your diet, which a lot of the trendy diets, you have to examine the trendy diets, and I've been examining them for 40 years, and they come and go and come and go. And you always find the front and the back, and some people do really well with them for 6 months, and then they can't sustain it. And then other people don't do so well. Understanding the energetics, I think, and understanding body types, you can learn how some sort of diets work for some folks, and it's a disaster. Like the raw food diet, how it might work for young people living in California and feeling great in the summertime, but not working for an older person in Scandinavia in the wintertime, right? So you start to understand these energetics. And so there's wisdom around whole foods, like sprouting them, essene breads, gruels, soaking them overnight, getting rid of the phytic acids. There's wisdom around how to make beans digestible and using seaweeds with it, and how they are a remarkable food, how they provide a lot of the protein and amino acids that we need. So beans and grains have been around since the beginning of time, and modern people have starting to have problems with them. Some people even write books and they become bestsellers, and they've just earned themselves a couple of $1 million by saying, oh, you shouldn't eat beans. Oh, my godfathers. This is when I get round up, guys. I mean, have they not traveled through South America and Asia, where millions of people sustain themselves off beans, right? I mean, how arrogant can you get, from a Western perspective? It's just arrogant. You got to watch out for some of these. The Western perspective, you see, is just, they're sort of going like, oh, beans, they've got lectins in it. Oh, and those lectins are going to create havoc in your body, so don't eat them. Come on, there's a way of getting rid of the lectins. You soak them over the night. You cook the beans really well. Traditions sometimes put mustard seeds in there and bay leaves, and they put seaweeds in there, and they put other herbs and spices, and they make a delicious dish which really, really nourishes your kidneys and your reproductive organs, and it's bringing in a soft form of protein. And nature provides over 6,000 beans on the planet to eat. So nature's sort of going like, maybe this is a good idea for you little human guys. And, so there's interesting things in the modern life. There's so much information going around that sometimes it's just way overboard for me. Let's go back to these wisdoms, these traditions, right? And let's honor what feeds people on this planet. So vegetables in season, we're really into, the farmer's market and connecting with your local cottage industries, big time. But we're modern people. Do I eat avocado out of season? Yes. Do I break that rule? Yes, quite often. But as a general principle, yes, we like to embed ourselves into that season and celebrate what's growing in our bioregion, so that energetically we get more connected with nature and with that season. And as you know from the 5-element theory, as you go through wintertime, you heal your kidneys. As you go through springtime, you heal your liver. As you go through the summer yang time, you heal your heart. And there's food groups that nature is providing that we should really celebrate. There's cooking styles and tastes that we should really celebrate at that time. So we're never narrow-minded or, I admire people though that can do that. They're eating within 100 miles of where you live. And the restaurants now that are setting up where it's that sort of farm to plate, wow, that's something that we really celebrate. And that's what we really need to get back to. That's what our ancestors had with the small farms. The small farms were really diverse. The local community ate from all the food groups, high quality fats and oils and animal products were available. And those people were generally quite healthy. The health statistics prove it. Remember now we've got 1 in 4 people with cancer and heart disease, and 1 in 7 with respiratory problems, and autism I never heard of until 20 years ago, right? And obesity. When you look back, turn of the century, we had other things to deal with. We had some infectious diseases and we had some hygiene problems, but we've cleaned all of that up beautifully, so we don't have those problems anymore. So now we've got the best of all of these worlds coming together. Sea vegetables, guys, learn how to use sea vegetables. That's another takeaway from, don't muck around, find out how to use them, go onto the internet, find some recipes, ask the health food store. Very, very simple to get started. Put a strip of kombu in your stock. Every time you make a stock, by the way, you might have noticed I talk about stocks. So the secret to longevity is in the stock. That's the famous RG motto. Weston Price went to Okinawa, and Okinawa is, as you know, the most famous out of the cultures of longevity. And so, as you know, he visited over 15, but this fishing village in the island of Okinawa, they were the ones that had more people living over 100 than anybody else. So what I did was I said, okay, well, let's examine their diet, which he did. He wrote about brilliantly, him and his wife, by the way. Every summer they would travel to a culture of longevity. And don't forget, traveling in those days was you had to get on the boat, and then you get on an old bus, and then you'll catch a donkey up the hill for 3 days, and you would arrive at the village, So you take my hat off to him and his wife every summer. For a good 15 odd years he did this. And the point I'm making in Okinawa is it's a fishing village. And the woman would, get the fish and fillet it, and all the bones would go into the cauldron. And traditionally, the cauldron, every village kind of had one. And if it was a strong economic village, they'd have a really, really fancy one. If you ever get a chance to go to the Taiwanese Taipei Museum, and as you know, all the riches ornaments of China, when the communists came to town, they took it to Taipei. And that museum, you want to spend 3 days looking at the museum. It's absolutely amazing. And you come across the cauldrons, and they're just, out of the palaces. This is where the cooks would be cooking their stock. And as you know, every good French chef has the stock pot. That's the center of all of the action. It starts there. In fact, in my opinion, your journey towards health and longevity starts with the stock. And so they were making the stock out of the fish bones, right? And the fish bones, of course, is full of Jing from Chinese medicine. That's the Jing is held in the bones, and of course, that's the fat soluble A and D you know, that they were getting, and E, right? And all the minerals. And what else would they put in there? Some seaweed. And what else would they put in there? Leftover vegetable scraps. And that stock went into their soups and vegetable dishes, and it went into their, when they cooked their porridge and their grill, which was buckwheat and millet. And did they have a fresh garden, fresh vegetables, right? And what oil did they use? Now, here's the deal. This is fast forward from Weston Price, who analyzed this clearly, truthfully. You fast forward to these writers who started to pick up on this in the 1980s and started to call it the Blue Zone diet. And these writers were obsessed with the low-fat diet, right? And quite frankly, they couldn't understand it, and they actually left it all out. Every culture of longevity had pigs across the board, right? It was lard that they were using in their cooking, right? Then they would, if trading, they traded sesame oil, right? Which is kind of like the oil of the Orient, you know, Japan and China, Vietnam, you know, it's some more southern. You had other influences like coconut and palm oil and sesame, but across the board, just like in our ancestry, we had tallow and lard. Very, very available. Poor people could have this. You had to have a little bit more money to get the olive oil, right? And yes, olive oil was very much available in our European tradition, but it was also tallow and lard, the saturated fats, right? Saturated fats were there in all cultures of longevity. That's what builds up your gene. That's what holds, that stabilizes. It doesn't oxidize. It doesn't create free radicals in the body. It delivers in the fat soluble A and D and E that you need, and vitamin K, which Weston Price called the missing ingredient from the modern Western diet. So that's sea vegetables. Starts experiment, like a little bit of wakame in your soup, like make the famous miso soup that Macrobiotics introduced. Good place to start. Do we use wild fish, grass-fed animal proteins, eggs, and raw dairy? Do we examine that? Do we look at the energetics? Absolutely. That's part of the longevity profile here. And we show people how to incorporate this if they want to. A lot of the dishes that we make, we will make, for instance, in the class, we would actually make a vegetarian stock as well for those who are vegetarian, because there's good ways of making a vegetarian stock, you know, with the kombu and some herbs. And they would also make, you know, a stock out of beef bones or fish bones would start off with, right? So yeah, there's ways of, you know, doing this. It's ultimately up to you. We don't push anything. But the point I'm making is that in terms of ancestral eating and cultures of longevity, they integrated, all of them integrated. There was no such thing as a vegetarian culture of longevity. It just didn't exist. Zilch. You might argue, what about the Indian cultures? No, it didn't happen. There was a few little tangents for religious areas where they'd go off and be vegetarian but down in the village, no, nobody was vegan. That was never heard of, right? Didn't exist, right? So these foods, these high quality animal foods in Chinese medicine, they are a blood building food, and a lot of people have deficiencies. A lot of people have what the so-called qi deficiency and the blood deficiency, which starts to damage the organs, and it reduces your longevity, and it creates a lot of hormonal problems, and it creates a lot of headaches due to this deficiency. And so this helps to build up the blood and the qi. Then what we do is we show you how to do animal and vegetable foods in a balanced way. Do it the traditional way. So if you want to incorporate animal foods, I suggest you do it this way. Meat on the bone is what our European ancestors used for tens of thousands of years. And it's when it's like in this, we haven't had an oven until recently. The Industrial Revolution created the oven. And thank God for that. We used to cook soups, right? And so the bones would go into the soup with vegetables, and that was the stock. And you'd have a little bit of meat. You get all the energy out of the bones as well, and you have vegetables. And we kind of like a ratio of 1 part meat to 5 parts vegetable, sometimes 1 to 7. So that's a good place to start. You know, you just have a little bit of meat, and you can use that seasonally. Like in the wintertime, you need more warming things as well, right? But clinically, we use this to build up the blood again, to nourish the organs, and it's deep nutrition, right? So we show people how to use animal products. There's another various ranges of doing. Because of time, I can't just keep blabbering on about one particular food group. I can do some questions later. When you go shopping for fish, yes, guys, get your priorities straight. Spend some more money on high quality wild fish. Absolutely. And avoid the fish farm, right? So when you go out to a restaurant, it's going to be fish farmed. So what? You're there for your friends and to enjoy a glass of wine and all of that. But when you're shopping for yourself and your family, and your partner, and your mother and your father, you really want to get high quality, wild, fatty fish, and the traditional fish of your, hopefully of your culture. And that's actually from your coastline. Again, it's a way of like embedding yourself into your culture, your bioregion. I think is very, very important. Are we into tonic soups? Taoism is like about making foods, like we're into soups and casseroles and broths, and because we're always about looking after the middle heater, the earth element. We're always after that school of stomach and spleen. We're always after, more important for us is build up strong blood and chi, rather than this thing of detoxifying this, that, and the other, and avoiding this, that, and the other, and scatterbrain this and scatterbrain that. No, it's simple for us. Good, hearty food, build up the energy, build up the chi, so your circulation works, so that when you step out in the snow, you feel great. You don't have cold hands and feet. You have broths and drinks and that cool you down in the summer, because you now understand warming and cooling foods, and the teas that like the flower teas that can take away the heat of the summer. So if there's a heat wave coming, you're fine with that. If there's a snowstorm coming, you're fine with that, because you start to understand how to eat with the seasons, to eat with yin and yang, what's warming, what's cooling. Do we use raw dairy foods? Now, in our European tradition, we had that a lot. And unfortunately, we've had pasteurized, chemicalized milk. So I would avoid that like the plague, right? Modern dairy food, out the door. You don't need that anymore, right? And quite frankly, it's quite toxic because of the hardened casings. When they heat the milk fats, the casing hardens, your liver finds that quite a struggle, it's quite toxic, right? What we talk about is the growing grassroots movement of real food again, which is propagated by the Western Aid Price Foundation. Macrobiotics didn't do that. I don't know why. They just sort of got bogged down. There was a lot of Japanese teachers, and they don't like dairy food. They didn't have dairy food, and to a degree, they might have a little intolerance, right? But our European tradition, we really celebrate. And in fact, there's a culture of longevity that Western Price study very, very well. This lovely little village up in the Swiss mountains that you can read about, and their diet was raw milk, and of course the beautiful cottage cheese that they could take from the raw milk, particularly from the spring grass, right? So that was providing a lot of the solid fats that they needed and the amino acids that they needed. They would trade in some grains, particularly rye and wheat, and make a beautiful sourdough, traditional, where you break all those down. There's no problems with the gluten, and all the B vitamins are available. Did they have a garden in the summer? Did they preserve foods over the winter? Did they go hunting in the winter for the deer? Absolutely. But their principal food was these vegetables and raw dairy food, right? And these people, no degenerative disease, happy temperament, coherent culture. Other places around Switzerland were getting tuberculosis. Tuberculosis never hit them. Well documented. And when you actually start to get into the dense nutrition available from raw dairy food, it's actually remarkable. Again, you can follow up with that research from the Weston A. Price Foundation website. You'll find some good research there. So it's a little bit hard to find sometimes. Not everybody needs to start with this, by the way. But what's interesting is, even if you have a damp condition, right, and that's from the poor quality dairy foods, which is why a lot of people say don't eat dairy foods, and that's kind of fair enough. But when you actually have high quality and that's unpasteurized, it's raw, it melts in your mouth. All the enzymes are there for you to digest it. And now you can build up that yin quality, that lovely mucus quality that needs to go over the intestines. Otherwise you get irritation and inflammation and leaky gut syndromes. It will nourish your skin, right? It will nourish your complexion with the moisture, the right amount of moisture it needs, right? It will calm you down. It will build up your yin so you get better sleep problems, better sleep solutions, right, etc. So the energetics are very, very interesting there. And it's becoming more and more available as people wake up to the fact that we need our traditional healing foods again. Nuts and seeds, we soak. Yes.
Roger, can I intercede? Because this is amazing and wonderful. And we're moving to our last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Time has flown because, you know, you are on a roll with a deep body of wisdom here. It's wonderful. And you may want to, you know, round off with some things, but should we take some questions from people?
Well, I'll tell you what, Gina, let me go. See that list there?
Yeah.
Then I've done what we've advertised, which is
go for it.
Me going through eating with the longevity diet. And then I've kind of done it. Yeah.
Great.
So in a nutshell, the fats and the oils, I do recommend coconut oil. I do recommend olive oil. Yeah. So and palm oil. There's some nice Jing oils like pumpkin seed. And then I highly recommend butter. And if you can get hold of raw butter, a ghee, which has been used for thousands of years in the Ayurvedic, but also in our Western tradition, you know, the purified butter is the ghee. And of course, we use that a lot. And the temperature cooking with it is a lot higher when you purify it. And if you're not vegetarian, I highly recommend that you find some high quality lard and butter, or just make it, keep it yourself. If you've ever using animal foods, there's always the fat off that, right? And you keep it in the cup next to the stove and use it, and the food is tasty, it's delicious. You're getting the fat soluble vitamins and minerals that you need again. We use fruit in season. Now, fruit is quite yin. You have to be careful around fruit. Most Western nutritionists sort of say, hey, eat more fruit and more vegetables. Well, I agree with 50% of that. Eat more vegetables, various styles of cooking. But no, the fruit you have to be a little bit more careful with. Just try to eat it in season. Maybe the berries are always good to go for first. And sure, have some lemon and limes and lemon drink and citrus, but don't overconsume the fruit, especially in wintertime, because of its cooling action. And it can fluctuate the blood sugar levels big time. Now, from a Feng Shui perspective, we like good fire and good water. So absolutely, you really need to think about always advising people to get a water filter. Even some of us love to get into the esoteric side of water, like restructuring it, recharging it, which every cell membrane in your body, which by the way is made up of saturated fats, not polysaturated. saturated fats, every cell membrane, but it also has this sort of dodeca-icosa of water around it, which starts to create like a little antenna for the forces of the universe. So it's important to have some recharged water, not the dizzy water. We kind of understand that from geomancy and Feng Shui trainings, right? And I always tell people to avoid the microwave when I do Feng Shui consultations. I really give them that whole story, and they can take it or leave it, you know. But in your own life, good quality fire is really, really important. Ideally, it's still, you know, like gas cooking, right? And we use a whole range of medicinal mushrooms, the superfoods, the herbal teas, etc. We use lacto-fermented foods. We're very into the bone broth. We've been propagating that for many, many years. For me, it's a real cure-all, just like a miso soup. The bone broth, it's a real cure-all. For the immune system, I highly recommend that you explore the medicinal mushrooms and start to incorporate them into your diet. Here's some pictures from our students. Here's the importance of vitamin A and vitamin D. You might have heard through the 3 years of the pandemic that most Western people are very, very low in vitamin D, and then your immune system is compromised, right? So you really need to think about, where does that come from? Well, eggs and caviar and liver, and of course our ancestors used to eat organ meats, right? Nobody does that anymore, right? Because what modern people go, ooh, organ meats, but that previous generation, they all grew up with it, right? And that's the most nutrient-dense food on the planet, and that's what traditional people ate. So you might want to start to incorporate that, particularly very good for pregnancy, by the way, because pregnancy, you naturally get blood deficient, etc. But that's where you get, it's hard to get from a vegetable source. Vitamin A and V, vitally important. The whole history of pasteurization, it's a real problem. Not convinced, go to the Weston A. Price Foundation, lots of material there. This is what your vegetable oils, this is what your vegetable, where it comes from. Massive processing that goes on. Associated, the vegetable oils associated with a lot of disease process, along with the high sugar consumption. So if you manage those two, you'll probably get rid of 90% of degenerative diseases just by doing that, in my opinion. So importance of traditional fats I've got here. There's the diseases. That's hopefully you will never make a or buy a commercial salad dressing again after our time together this evening. And if you do, I'm going to be standing behind you with a big stick, and I'm going to just get some tahini, guys. Get some olive oil. Get some mustard. Get some, you know, please don't buy Paul Newman's canola, chemicalized. Never again in your life. Okay. So Jing Foods. So let's have a look, Gina. 5-element theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, hold on, Gina. Just give me a second. I know where you're going, but just give me a second. There's a couple of Jing's Foods. Okay. Yeah, I've pretty much covered to that point, Gina, because after the questions, for those who want to stay around, I will go through the what we do with the academy. Yeah.
Well,
So,
I
yeah.
think what we can do also as a follow-up is to send, because I know what you've done presentations like this, overviews for the academy, which is kind of open to the public. So I think we could send a Vimeo link, couldn't we, of something else that people could watch at them, or there are 1 or 2 things on Vimeo that we could send, and we can send them the link. Now, one of the questions that we've had is, and where's the chat gone? On the chat, I've lost my chat. Chat is here. Yeah. Your favorite meal, Roger, which embodies all your principles. So give us your favorite meal that that ticks all the boxes, that brings everything together.
Oh, that's easy. Soup.
You're going to say that. but it is a
People ask
marvel.
me, you know, I've traveled over 6 million miles and over 70 countries and, you know, blah, 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 been here, there, blah, whatever. And people have asked, and I've never got sick, right? Including traveling through India 4 or 5 times, Tibet and blah, blah, blah. And I just go from a soup to a soup to a soup. That's the first trick. And when you're in India and it's hot, you go from a lassi to a lassi to a lassi. And I personally like high quality poached eggs in the morning and oat porridge soaked overnight. And I put my superfoods into the like chia seeds and I soak pumpkin seeds and a bit of coconut, serrated coconut, goji berries, and then I put. Now here's the trick: if I just had the porridge, it kind of it will just last a couple of hours, and then I'll start to feel hungry again. But quite frankly, if I put a big wallop of raw butter, or if I can't get my hands on raw butter, I get organic butter. Put a big wallop on there. Boy, is it tasty! But now, instead of the oats spiking my blood sugar, all grains are going to do that to an extent, as you know. And instead of it spiking it like this, having the fats and the oils in there, it stabilizes it. And I'll go for several hours, right? So it always sneak in those fats, and then you'll feel saturated. You'll feel you won't spike your blood sugars, and so that's one of my favorite breakfasts, along with Gina Lazenberry's buckwheat pancakes.
Yeah, thanks. Which, since you know, I've learned from you. I moved away from low fat, but still, it's kind of deeply ingrained over many years. You know, I was more sparing with the fat, but I load up that buckwheat pancake with coconut oil, and it's lovely. You know,
Yeah.
or ghee. So yes,
Yeah.
Roger, you know that I tell people I'm a meat-eating vegan, don't you?
Yeah, it's a good one. I like that.
Because
like, where do they put that? You know, I think when you tell people that, they get instant enlightenment. You know how you diffuse the left and the right brain and the rational and I think, bing, they go pop.
Well, I do that because, you know, coming from whole food and macrobiotics, you know, without meat. But I just intuitively know my body needs some meat, and of course, since studying with you, the kitchen is full of bone broth now, completely.
Good on you. Yeah, good on you.
So should we just see if anybody should we look at the gallery? So if you remove your
stop the share.
Yeah, stop the share, and then we can go to the gallery and see if people wants to ask a question or make a comment their diet or a takeaway that they might have, not in food, but a takeaway idea. Or a change, you know, maybe people are already doing all this, Roger, you know.
Some of the
in some ways I'm sure people are, you know, but maybe there's a takeaway that somebody has that they
hopefully they are.
Yeah, anybody want to share? Put your hand under your mic. Yeah, Adele, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. My mother was macrobiotic, so later part of my teens we were all macrobiotic, and then, you know, went on my own way and ate everything. And then, you know, in the last few years I went vegan for a couple of years, but I really found I just wasn't strong enough with it, and so I've added back some fish and some other things, you know. So it's just finding your balance, isn't it? It's finding what's right for you personally. And it's the dance, you know, between wanting to be good to the planet and wanting to be good to the animals, and then wanting to be good for yourself, you know.
Well, first of all, I think you should be good to yourself. I think health is number one, and these sort of ideologies are number two, as far as I'm concerned. And we don't have time to debate that whole thing about animals and animal farming. Obviously, we stay away from factory farming, and we encourage and we put our hard-earned money with organic farming and folks that are really, really respectful of animal farming. And if you ever get into what we call regenerative agriculture, which I'm seriously involved with. I've helped to develop organic horticultural products. I've done things like Bloom the Desert. And you cannot do farming without animals, guys. There is a complementary world. It's called yin and yang, animal and vegetable. And they work together on the farm, right? And we can have successful agriculture. We could feed the whole planet with this without the industrialized animal, which is shocking. I'm shocked just as much as any vegan. But from a Chinese medicine perspective, you would never find, I would say that you would never find a Chinese doctor recommending a vegan diet because it's just too cooling. It lacks a lot of nutrition that you need, the vitamin A, D, vitamin, just simple vitamin B12. You have to work at, you have to supplement, you have to work a lot harder. And the tendency towards blood deficiency is quite big, and cold symptoms is quite big amongst the vegan people. And of course, you know, I get a bit of flack for that, so be it. I'm a tough enough guy. I'm a little sensitive though, you know. But you know, I make my stand. It's not sustainable. People do it for a little bit, and then there's you know, because they're interested in the planet. They're interested in but it's not sustainable, and even with the agricultural perspective, it's not sustainable. Right? Yeah, and even it's a big subject, and we should really have a pint of beer in the pub afterwards to discuss it more about the whole thing with that. Yeah, it's a good one though. But at the end of the day, it's about, you're not going to be very productive and helpful unless your health is there. So health has to be number one. You have to explore what works for you, rather than what other people are blabbering on about, you know, save the planet and, you know, save the pigeons or whatever. You got to get your health together, and then you can expand out and really, you know, get involved with ecology, and get involved with getting us off fossil fuels. Get involved with organic farming and local communities and local food, and make a garden. And, you know, you can't do that unless you're healthy. So health has to be your first priority. Then the ideologies will naturally come after that, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Okay, I'm going back to the gallery. Anybody else got a comment about, I mean, Roger is a huge fan of wisdom here, and if you have got a question over something, this is really the golden opportunity to ask. It really is. Because, you know, Roger, about the milk, so many books say milk is designed for baby cows. It's almost like a programming. So why would you drink milk when it's designed for baby cows? And you think, I'm a human. So you think, no, you're putting forward this aspect of industrialized milk, pasteurized versus raw milk. And there's no question there about it being for baby cows only. So can you just expand on that point? What is that? Where is this story from about it's only for baby cows?
Yeah, it's a little simplistic. You could say that about a lot of foods. You know, it's very simplistic. I mean, look, as I've said, I've stated that avoid modern commercial dairy food, right? So that, yes, that's a place to start. And in Chinese medicine, that's associated with damp and sluggishness and liver problems because of the casein. And you see, with the pasteurization, you've knocked out all the enzymes that nature has provided us with digesting that milk and making the fats available to us, and so forth. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there's cultures all over the world since the beginning of time that have celebrated goats. Even in Taoism, you see, to stabilize the Kundalini, to stabilize, sometimes you've been meditating and Kundalini is going like this, they would reach for the wild sheep's milk and the goat's milk and what if they could get that yin back down into their body to quench that fire, which can do it. If it goes overboard, it can create some damage, right? So we know in Chinese medicine that quality of milk builds up the yin, right? And a lot of people don't understand the yin aspect. A lot of people in the Feng Shui community have been exposed to macrobiotics. And macrobiotics is all about yang, 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 yang. You got a yang eyes, and and they never talked about building yin, building blood, right? Building lubrication. They always said, "Oh, everybody's too yin, you should yang eyes." That's incredibly simplistic, and it goes against the themes of clinical Chinese medicine as well. So the point I'm making, since the beginning of time, we've been using these milks, and then we use the ferments from them, right? And to say that is also arrogant, because millions of people in India, this incredible civilization of the Indian continent, guess what their food was? Milk. They were incredible thinkers and technology developers, and they built an incredible. And so, to say that, oh, it's just for children is very simplistic. And then if you look into the nutrition of it, it's phenomenal, right? And especially then, some cultures, it was a way of getting a food source that you could store over winter. So in Europe, they would store that in cheese, and they would store it in like cottage cheese, etc., right? And that was a way of surviving the winter months as well. So it's been vitally important to us since the beginning of time. So the trick is you have to fight, if you want to experiment with that, don't be afraid of it, first of all. It's been bagged too much, so start to understand the yin and the yang. Yin foods build up the calming energy, the right amount of nourishment. If you've got dry symptoms, you need some high quality yin foods that build that essence up, the moisture up again, right? If you've got a lot of damp, then maybe you don't need dairy food for a good 3 to 4 months, and then you just bring it back in lightly, like a little bit of high quality feta cheese in a salad, where you have all these other dynamics to help to digest it as well, including pickles,
And what about the difference between cow's milk versus sheep and goat? Is there a hierarchy there, or all the same?
Yeah, some people do better with sheep. Some people do better with goat, some people do with milk, and they've discovered that themselves. And sometimes there's some interesting genetics behind that, right? There are energetic differences, like goat is like a very, if you're using the character of food, goat is very tough. Cows are very strong, solid, so there's some, I personally like sheep's feta. It's a high quality probiotic, guys. And again, vitamin A, D, fat soluble, strengthening the bones, good for the immune system, a blood builder.
And well, we've run over our time. This is recorded. There are people who will be interested. So I just wanted to log a couple of things, and that is, we've put the link for the Academy, we'll send it. And what you do there is each quarter, or in the 5 elements of seasons, the Academy offers a good hour of what to eat, don't you, in that season? So if people sign up for that, they'll get a cooking class in a sense, or direction of what to eat in that season, which is excellent content, and what to eat in spring, how to change the cooking in the summer. And that's all on the Academy as a resource if people don't want to study the whole program, but they want to dip in, and you've got a lot of resources there. So I'm just flagging that up, and we will send people the link. And before I move to close with you and offer the opportunity for people to stay on and ask you questions, I just want to say that we've got another event this week online where we're starting now an expert forum. So we have Jan, and Jan, if he's here, might tell me, or Carol might tell me who there's 2 practitioners who
Chrissy Parker.
Chrissy, thank you very much, Victoria. to be like Roger is here now, to be answer questions for people. So it's got Jan's putting it in the chat. We're starting that on Wednesday. We do it once a month. So 2 or 3 feng shui experts there to answer questions. I think that's going to be great, and submit questions in. Friday night, anybody in reach of London, we're doing a social event. We're going to go to the Feng Shui Inn for dinner while I'm in London, and I'm in London because the Feng Shui Society has a stand at the Clean and Tidy show. Again, if you're near to the south, it's a good event. I'll be speaking on Saturday afternoon at 4 there on the main stage, talking about what am I talking about? I'm talking about placements related to intention. So amplifying intention with placements. I'm talking about that Saturday afternoon, and Vicky is going to be talking about, she's going to be doing a demo on space clearing, I think on Sunday. So we've got links there. And then our next webinar is with Alex Stark on the 18th of October. We'll be sending information out next week about that. And an offer we put out for the event this weekend is to become an official friend of the society, quotes, official friend. And we have offers, benefits. It's £25 for the year. And as we do more and more events, which we will charge for, there will be less money or free, all sorts of things you'll have access to. Conference videos worth £29 for the costs for the cost of your membership as a special offer. So that's going out, that's out on the blog and other places. It's on the website. So that's the news of what's coming up, which I wanted to do. I want to officially thank you, Roger, for this. I think people have gathered here that you are passionate and knowledgeable and wise about something that's fun. You know, I don't think people quite realize the value and importance of food. We're in and out of people's homes. We increasingly see kitchens getting smaller, people eating out more. I can't speak for everybody, but you know, I think, and there's an interest in good food, but there's a lot of clutter of information, and I certainly can endorse what I've learned from you is the clarity and taking away the clutter and simple principles of living well. And I'd like to thank you very much for spending time with us this evening, this session. And if people do want to stay on and ask questions, then we can stop the recording now and come to the close of our session and see.
Yeah, just like to say that, you know, the website is academyhealingnutrition.uk. It's very much you know, London-based sort of headquarters at the moment. The team is very much located there. And as Gina said, if you sign up for the newsletter, every season we offer a good 5-element overview. Often it's done by different faculty members. You know, we go through the seasonal eating, the 5-element theory, etc. And we have our training program starting this weekend, which is a live online. So again, academyhealingnutrition.uk, and you'll find there are some videos up there, I think, as well. And if you want to speak to an enrollment team member, it pretty much starts this coming weekend. And there's a module, one it's nicely paced, 1 module a month over the next 10 months or so.
It's great, I have to say. I'm still in the program, and it's life-changing. It's wonderful, and it's great to have solid information to add to, you know, the information I've got already, which I've gleaned over decades. But I've learned a lot, I have to say, even as a whole food cook.
Right.
Yeah, joining all the dots really on health. So I would thoroughly endorse people finding out all sorts of information from the academy. So Roger, again, thank you.
Thanks,
Here
guys.
we're still hanging out with you. We might have some questions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people
fine.
are going to go for the night anyway. Thank you, Roger.
Ciao.